let's get started. I know some of you are here early because we have a wonderful overview this morning of technologies that have been being utilized in the past, the ones we think are being utilized going forward. And we have had a request over the years to do this each workshop, is highlight what exists, and then the hands-on parts and the presentations during the workshop are all of the things being developed. But there is no better person who knows the history than Justin Trieger from New World Symphony. New World Symphony and myself and colleagues from Internet 2 many years ago invented the first version of this workshop that has really grown and expanded and now is very much alive, both in the US and Europe. We alternate every other year. Justin has been our host for this workshop always when it's been in the US. So New World Symphony knows this suite of technologies very well. And Justin, I will let you introduce, I know you're going to introduce yourself and New World Symphony, but thank you for being with us wherever you have traveled from, and we'll have lots of receptions to get to know each other. So Justin, I will turn it over to you. Let Claudio and me know if you want us to take over. It's, I think, 3 in the morning for Justin in Miami Beach.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
To you.
Yeah, I obviously had really wished that I was there with you all, and that was my intention originally, and fate would have it be otherwise. But the good news is that normally I speak too fast. So now, with the added complexity of it being 3 in the morning where I am, I might talk a little bit slower. And what I would start out by saying is that a lot of the opinions, and that's what they are in this presentation, are my own. And they come from my past experience and perspective as someone who is more specifically focused on the impact these technologies can have in music education and music performance. So if your focus lies outside of those particular use cases, then I would take all of this with a grain of salt, or feel free to challenge me on any of these opinions that I am about to share. And this session is meant to be informal in most cases, and I would encourage, if you have questions, to interrupt me, because I think we all learn a lot more when it's more of a conversation than me just sharing my opinion with you without any kinds of interruption. That's no fun. So I'll go ahead and show these beautiful slides that I've spent a little bit of time putting together, and we can get this conversation started and kick off MPAPW 2022, which is in such a long time in coming. I see you can see my slides, so
We can.
again, this is a conversation about the performing arts specifically, and even more targeted, for my sake, about music and music education. So that's where this perspective comes from. That's my experience primarily. Anne mentioned that I am based in Miami Beach, Florida, at an organization called the New World Symphony. The New World Symphony, which is celebrating its 35th anniversary, is a unique organization in the United States, at least, that's essentially a postgraduate music academy for classical musicians. What does that mean? Well, we've got 87 fellowship musicians who can join us for up to 3 years. They mostly hail from prominent conservatories, schools of music from all over the world. Most of them have a master's degree. And what we do is a combination of continuing education. It's almost like a training orchestra. But we also have a large educational footprint, both in the United States, around our local community in Florida, but increasingly more of an international presence in South America, given where we are located. So when students come to study at New World Symphony, they get a combination of professional experience. We present concerts every weekend from early September to early May. And they are taught more about what it means to be a musician and a leader. And then beyond that, they're taught how to be an effective community member and young youth music educator. That's kind of the three areas of focus. What you see here is a picture of our campus, which consider this a formal invitation if any of you in the room have not been to visit with us yet. The building that you see, which is in South Beach, Miami Beach, was constructed in 2011 by architect Frank Gehry in consultation with my organization. So normally a Frank Gehry building, if you're familiar with his other work in Spain and of course the Los Angeles Philharmonic Disney Concert Hall, a lot of these big undulating cube, hard to identify shapes that usually cascade and stack on top of each other. In Miami Beach, it's a Art Deco district with very strict aesthetic rules that were established a long time ago. So Frank Gehry's joke was that he created a right rectangle and then put all of his characteristic boxes, which you can see in this giant curtain screen, glass window here, so that he could conform to the very angular requirements of the Art Deco historic district, while still making it look like his own building. On the inside, we have a 270-degree projection surface which hangs above the performance hall. The hall itself is extremely flexible in terms of the entire performance stage is on hydraulic lifts. It can be flattened with the rest of the floor. A lot of the seating can be automatically retracted for a variety of programming scenarios and situations. And the building contains, at this point, more than 17 miles of optic fiber. And the purpose of that fiber is a combination of activities like the ones we're going to talk about, but also for just traditional video and audio transport within the walls of the building. So we're one of the largest 4K broadcast facilities in the southeastern United States. In fact, I think we were the first to leverage 12G 4K technology in kind of before it was standardized to the extent that we have. So those fibers are used for networking data, but it's also a lot of raw, very high resolution video data that gets streamed over that infrastructure. So I mentioned 87 fellowship musicians make up the orchestra. They can be with us for up to 3 years. Most of them don't stay that long. We do over 100 concert productions each year, and all of our programs are really focused on the idea of creating the next era of leaders in the classical music space, and further, more broadly these days. So the reason I'm talking to you is that New World was a very early adopter in interactive technology for the purpose of education and performance. And I don't know if we can actually claim ownership of these images, but I thought these were good representations of what these experiments looked like in those early years. So our first formal activities took place in 2002 and leveraged very gigantic, heavy servers that were manufactured by this company, Star Valley Systems. And what those would do is basically take a standard definition video input, so not HD, and compress it in real time to MPEG-2 video spec, pair it with uncompressed audio, which was nice for the time, and stream it to another device of the exact same make and model somewhere else. And so that would result in very slow connections that would only allow for asynchronous, as we call it these days, but call and response type education situations, or like the picture on the right of the scrim with the dancer being projected against another live dancer on stage. We'll call it more improvisatory types of performance activities. So that was how these things got started, and New World really got its feet wet in 2005, 2006, around when this conference that you're now at was formed. And here's some more screenshots of what the period directly following that started to look like. And I'm coining these terms this time around, so I think of the development of these technologies and the industry as before the Lola era, before Lola was a viable option, and the post-Lola era. So that's why I'm calling it BLE and ALE later on. I'm sure Claudio will appreciate this. In any case, 2007 to 2010, we relied primarily on a combination of hardware and software solutions. The hardware solutions used a standard known as H.323. It's a telephony standard, used heavily compressed audio. In the early days, it was only standard definition video, but did so in a way that was fast enough that the communication was more responsive, more interactive. It allowed for us to do high quality teaching with relatively low complexity, because these devices were very purpose built for video communications. They didn't have a whole lot in the way of technical issues, as long as you had a reasonable amount of bandwidth between you and the person you're connecting with. And the performance and quality was good for the time. They were also ubiquitous, because these are the systems that began to enable remote meetings and video meetings in the early days of video communications on the internet. Some other tools, which some of you may know, some of you may not. For us in the MPAPW space, DVTS was a huge revelation. Very cool, free Windows application developed by the WIDE project, which is a consortium based in Japan. Basically, it took the raw video and audio coming off of a DV camera, so this is up to 720p video, usually 480p video, and take uncompressed audio with DV spec video. I think, Claudia, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I can't remember at this point, but I think it was 30 megabits per second.
Yeah, it is, yes.
Yeah, required for an outgoing and incoming stream in bidirection. So that was the entire interface. You open this application, you plugged in your FireWire DV camcorder, and you hit start send or start receive. And with very little additional latency beyond what is in the DV specification itself, you could establish a video communication in very high quality with no echo cancellation. And that was its major detractor. Similar in functionality, but a little more flexible, Conference XP was a project developed by Microsoft in this period, which was originally for classroom teaching, but the music education industry at some point decided they wanted to steal it and use it for its own purposes. What made Conference XP unique is that it allowed for things like multiple camera setups, because it could grab multiple USB web cameras at the same time. It had neat features for overcoming firewalls and network security traversal, which was unique to it. And Microsoft actually made the project open source at a certain point when they saw the interest from the music community, which allowed us to do things like install special video codecs that we wanted to, special audio codecs that we wanted to, all the time improving the quality that this free application was able to produce. And it was used quite extensively just because of how easy it was to get started. That picture also includes an old friend of a lot of people at this conference, Jose Fagali, who was a pianist primarily, but he really grabbed on this application and was a huge figure in our community. He's no longer with us, so I wanted to acknowledge his contributions because I will always remember Conference XP because of him. So moving into the 2010s, we have Lola, and here's a much younger Claudio Locchio over here in the right-hand corner. He looks the same, so you can't tell he's much younger. But this is a scene from an earlier edition of NPAPW, our first time hosting this event with Lola as kind of the featured application. We'll talk more about Lola in a second, but this was really a turning point in terms of what we could even imagine was possible in terms of being able to play synchronously or to play in time with someone over a network in high quality without much complexity. So that's why this is a defining moment. For me personally, this was the first time we looked at something and we were like, oh my goodness, we can actually do a co-located, so 2 locations, and produce a concert together, and it'll work. So that was a big moment for us. So now we're going to talk about my brain. And a dangerous place to go, especially at 3 in the morning.
I guess
But
that's coffee, not water.
Tea. I hope to go to sleep after we finish here, but we'll see how that goes. So whenever I'm evaluating new solutions, and we're gonna do now is do a broad overview of all the tools that I am familiar with and use with some frequency. But whenever outside of these tools, whenever I'm presented with a new technology, a new application, I come at it with this kind of bifurcation of, is it software or is it hardware? And based on that differentiation, I ask myself some other questions to evaluate how effective I think it can be, and if I can uncover where some underlying issues may come up for us. So if we're talking about software, first question for me is, what platforms are supported? These days, a lot of video communications software solutions are actually cross-platform, which was not the case when you're talking about Conference XP or DVTS or even Lola, which are specific to the Windows environment. So why do I ask this question? Well, if you're only catering to users of one or a handful of the major operating systems on devices these days, then obviously you're limiting the number of people you can reach with it. So something to consider. Is it paid or free? These days you can get really good results from free solutions, but free comes with the caveat that you don't necessarily have any real technical support. So is that important to you? Do you need to have commercial technical support? What is required beyond just the computer and the application? You know, a lot of computers are equipped with webcams and microphones, but those are usually really terrible microphones and usually really terrible webcams like the one I'm using. And are those going to allow you to achieve the educational or performative goals that you have for whatever the activity is? It's an important question to ask. Will they work with your existing infrastructure? A lot of schools of music, universities, performance venues, they have existing video infrastructure. So can we tie into it? It's a good question to ask. Is it actively maintained? Obviously, there are tools that come and get abandoned. I'm sure someone at some point this week will talk about JamKazam, which is a software tool that claims to perform in the same way that Lola does in terms of low latency, but over commercial networks. But was developed in the late 2010s and then abandoned and then resurfaced during the pandemic because of what it was supposed to be able to do. And so the reliability of the application working in modern operating system environments, it depends if it's still being actively maintained or if it's open source or any of these types of questions. Lastly, is it an app-based or in-browser solution? So we're seeing a at least in my experience. We're seeing a prevalence of more in-browser solutions these days rather than standalone applications. The idea being that applications can be a barrier for people to get into because it requires downloading something instead of just opening a browser window. That said, in-browser only solutions usually have limited flexibility. So it really depends on the solution whether or not it can provide the kind of flexibility that you would likely need. When we're talking about hardware, similar question to cross-platform, but in this context, it's more about how widely is the product used. So I mentioned H.323 systems before. They were very broadly used at one point, but they're kind of falling out of favor these days because there are such good software solutions. So if I have someone in mind who I'd like to connect with, do they also have this product? What is the reputation of that product from terms of reliability and quality? These are important things to ask. Hardware solutions also, by their very nature, because they're specialized devices just for this one type of thing, are more expensive. So that's another thing to consider is the investment worth it over going with a more limited software solution? Same question is software. What additional resources are combined? Again, if I have a whole video system in my performance hall already, can I just take a feed and plug it into that device? If not, how do I make that happen? Staffing. Software is usually something that most modern computer users can wrap their head around, but if it's a complex hardware solution with professional broadcast video standards in play, those things do not play well with things like mixed match frame rates, resolutions. So having someone with the knowledge to understand video infrastructure and broadcast infrastructure is often necessary. And same thing with audio. If you're plugging in a feed from your front of house mixing console or your recording studio, do you know how the interconnect will work? Is there any challenge with that? And then finally, since these systems are so expensive, how frequently do I need to buy a new one in order to stay current? Is a really important question to ask. When I'm evaluating a solution, I usually look at these 4 metrics, and we're going to define them because unless we have a mutual understanding of what these are supposed to mean, it can be confusing. So when I say ease of use, we're talking about how difficult is the hardware or application setup, how hard is it to run effectively. Quality is probably the easiest here, assuming all the conditions are the most favorable. So you've got beautiful video, beautiful audio, beautiful lighting, the network is amazing. What is the best quality video communication that this solution can provide, and how does it compare? Latency, also pretty, well, if you're not familiar with the concept of latency, it may not be the most easy thing to evaluate, but essentially what we're talking about is how much delay is inherent in this system. Are we talking about a quarter of a second? Are we talking about 100 milliseconds or a tenth of a second? Are we talking about something even lower? Because the nature of your activity will dictate how important that metric is for you. And then finally, accessibility. How widely is the solution used? Am I going to be able to find partners to connect with? And what kinds of staffing, financial, and equipment resources are required to make it work? Claudia, do we have any questions, or should I just keep barreling through?
Is there any questions till now? No, I don't see any. So
Great. So we talked about these legacy systems. Again, the 2 on the left, DVTS, Conference XP, software solutions that were used in the 2000s, and then Star Valley Systems were some of the first hardware solutions that we were using. I left this slide here because I used to evaluate these alongside some of the more modern solutions, and at this point, these are pretty much legacy solutions that are not in use anymore. In fact, I'm not sure you can download DVTS, and that's the first time that I found that when I was doing research for this talk. In the many years we've been using it. So, sad day. Depends on who you are, but a sad day. So the next grouping of slides is going to look at kind of the more prominent solutions that you're going to discuss this week. And again, my perspective, identifying some of the positives and negatives related to each of these solutions. So H323, yet again, there's a representative picture. I included a Polycom device because those are the H323 devices that we generally prefer because of the audio quality that they can achieve. They don't require a ton of bandwidth. In fact, highest quality video transport they do, which is 1080p HD, full HD, requires only as much as 4 megabits per second, which is not a lot in the scheme of internet bandwidth. Can go as high as 8 megabits per second these days. They, at one point, were very common. So if you were trying to make a connection, high quality connection with a partner who you'd not connected before, it was somewhat reasonable to expect that they would have one of these devices on campus somewhere. They might have to find it buried in a closet. Now, only the modern versions of these solutions are still supported by the company with software releases and updates. But it does have regular development cycles. They are maintained, and in that way, they have more customer support than the other things we're going to look at. So that's a benefit. And then another positive, there's onboard echo cancellation, which performs pretty well. So if you're not great with audio engineering principles and still want high quality audio, these systems can allow for a good experience without a whole lot of headache. Some of the downsides, these systems really prefer to connect to a sympathetic device. So if it's a Polycom device on my side, it should be a Polycom device on the other side and not a Life-Size or a Cisco or any of the other manufacturers, because the reason they're so expensive is because they reserve the best quality video and audio protocols for connections between the same manufacturer. Most of those systems are proprietary, and they do not like to share that software with other manufacturers for fear of losing market reach. They're very expensive. The last time I purchased one of these systems, which was a couple years ago, I think just for the box without the microphone or the camera was something like $11,000 or $14,000 US, which is not cheap. And I put onboard processing as a positive, but it's also a negative. So you don't have full control over how audio is processed in these boxes, or video for that matter. So they can create problems. They have a certain amount of compression that is required, dynamic compression on the audio signal, and they do not allow for uncompressed, unaffected audio to pass. And the negatives, the overall quality, these systems are reliable in the sense that the connections are very stable, assuming the network conditions are stable. But the video and audio quality, in my opinion, has not held with the market standard in software solutions as of late. The pandemic has really had a huge impact on this space for obvious reasons. And one of the challenges for the manufacturers of these devices is that, you know, tools like Zoom, even what we're using this morning for this remote presentation, achieve as good or higher quality than what these 11,000, 14,000 devices are capable of. Next up, UltraGrid. UltraGrid is developed by a research consortium in Czechia. It's been around for many years and is undergoing still continued development. You'll probably meet some of the folks who develop it while you're there, which is fun. They're a hugely supportive development group, much like the Lola folks, so I encourage you to say hello and to learn more about their solutions. Some of the great things about UltraGrid is that it allows you to use devices, external devices, as high quality as professional solutions, but also generic commodity devices, USB webcams, common audio interfaces, and is super flexible in terms of compression schemes and how much bandwidth it's consuming, what kind of delays it's inducing. It supports 4K and 8K video out of the box, which is, I think it's perhaps the only software solution, free software solution that I know of that can handle that high resolution video. It is cross-platform, so works on nearly every major operating system, and the internal latency, and I'm sure Milos or Sven will correct me, I'm always afraid of getting this wrong, but in experience, it seems like it's around 40 milliseconds. So removing everything but just the pure streaming handling of the data in the application, roughly 40 milliseconds, which is pretty fast. Some of the challenges, they do have versions of the software with graphical user interfaces, common application operation type setup, but in my experience, the most stable UltraGrid installations run by command line, so it requires learning some syntax, and not everyone's comfortable in that type of environment. Similarly, especially if you're talking about Linux, the various versions and releases, it can be hard to find the right one that works with your system. It's very easy to run them side by side, though, so this is more of just like understanding that it requires a little bit of legwork in the beginning to get started. But again, the development team is super helpful with helping people figure it out. The high resolution videos, multi-channel audio stuff, it still requires bandwidth. I mean, if you're pushing a lot of video and a lot of audio, you need more bandwidth. And the user base, at least in my world, is pretty limited. So we are a user of UltraGrid, but in the United States, at least, its predominance in music education is still pretty limited. And the image you see is from a previous performance, just an example of the kind of video quality and effect that you can achieve using this solution. And Renata, who's there, will fill in the details on that because it's her show. Lola, Claudio can also correct me when I get something wrong, but Lola is a Windows-only application. We've mentioned it a few times, but its true standout quality is the latency that can be achieved with that system, which is as low, at least in terms of capturing video and audio and then pushing it out of the computer, as 1 to 3 milliseconds. It does support multi-channel audio, multiple cameras being connected now, and allows for multi-point connections, which is a relative. The interface, which you'll see, I'm sure, is super simple. It kind of is a callback to DVTS in a lot of ways. It's a single graphical window. That's it. You just put in an IP address, and assuming all conditions are favorable, you just click connect. It's like placing a phone call. And it integrates very well with professional audio gear, which is nice for us. Some of the challenges with Lola: low latency means not a lot of compression, which means high bandwidth. So you need substantial bandwidth to be able to do Lola connections. this used to be the case, and Claudio, I'm guessing it's still true, but there are challenges because of the way that firewalls process incoming data streams that makes it.
There is a way to do it, but it's very complex. So yeah.
So basically, what this point is meant to say is you need to be good friends with your information technology department, because what Lola typically requires is a demilitarized zone or a network connection without any security measures put on it, which is not much of a risk to anything but the Lola computer. So it can be a hard sell, though. Multipoint, while available, presents unique challenges because of the low latency. Latency is not symmetrical necessarily from location to location, so it can be difficult to have conditions where it's easy to perform synchronously between multiple locations, even with low latency. And lastly, Lola relies on very specific USB 3 vision cameras and specific manufacturer-specific audio equipment. So you can't just use your audio interface necessarily that you already own. You may have to go get something new. Overall cost is pretty cheap, though, between the computer and the components. MVTP and Nimbra. So these, in my mind, are kind of like the evolution of the Star Valley systems that I was mentioning before. These are very purpose-built video and audio streaming solutions that are actually more common in the broadcast industry. So this is the kind of device you would use, say, if you were running a TV network and you wanted to host all of your content in a central location and stream that content live to distribution channels and regional networks for broadcast. Basically, you plug in a video input, a professional standard video input, and set it up to stream to another device, a sympathetic device with an IP address that's visible on the network. What enable these to be so fast, and they are very low latency devices, that's a requirement to the broadcast industry. What enables that possibility are what they call these FPGA circuits. So they're it's firmware, hardware circuits that can be programmed for very specific operations like video compression. They include error correction, so even if you don't have a perfect connection between two of these devices, it can overcome that to a certain degree, certain percentage. And these solutions, because come from the broadcast industry, do support high-resolution video, multi-channel audio, and in some cases can handle multiple channels of video simultaneously if the bandwidth is available. Downsides, they are very high bandwidth unless you're incorporating compression on the boxes. Even though they have error correction, the network must be pristine for a number of reasons. And usually these are used only on private networks. Synchronization, again, this is a common trope of broadcast video infrastructure, having a common clock, which enables seamless switching between video sources on the fly, is sometimes a necessity for these systems to operate in their best capacity. And they have a similar, well, MVTP is more affordable, but Nimbra, I think the folks there who use them more than I do will tell you they're very expensive, somewhere in the order, I think, of $20,000 to $30,000 US. But some of the highest quality commercial solutions you can find, no doubt. Here's the here's the pile of software clients and clients that leverage WebRTC, which are a lot of the in-browser software solutions that you use. I kind of grouped all these here. They obviously vary feature-wise very much from one to the next, but they all kind of fall into these reflections equally, in my opinion. So the good thing, most of them support HD video these days, which was not always the case. Audio has gotten quite good, at least with some. For instance, Zoom original audio Most of them are free to an extent, which is good for easy adoption and easy on-roading. They are cross-platform almost universally, and that's a huge benefit. It means it's very easy to get new users up and running. Some of the negatives, depending on which solution we're talking about, the processing of the audio can be really problematic and very limited in terms of what kind of control you have. Some of these systems incorporate security, which I know is important for educational environments, especially in Europe. So that's something to consider. Although these devices are capable of running on smartphones and virtually any laptop, it doesn't mean that the experience is the same, because of the resources available in those smartphone tablet computers are pretty not great. Usually it has an impact on what they're able to accomplish from a video and audio standpoint. And lastly, these are tools designed for voice communications, not music in most cases. So a lot of their compromises are made with that in mind. Last up on this roundup is Jacktrip. Jacktrip's a little unique. It's an audio-only solution, but it's been around for as long as UltraGrid, Lola, a lot of the things we've talked about, and it retains popularity because of how powerful and in some cases easy to use it is. They now actually offer hardware boxes that you can purchase from Amazon Prime, which is amazing, which allow you basically to connect an audio input and a network connection and use Amazon Web Services to do these connections on the fly very simply. It's audio only, but what that allows for is low latency over commercial internet, which is kind of cool. They do incorporate compression on audio if you want, but Jacktrip traditionally streams uncompressed audio, which is only about 750 kilobits per channel at CD quality. So that's something most home internet connections can handle these days, at least a few channels of audio at that level. And these devices and the software version integrate perfectly with Pro Audio Gear, and that's kind of how it was originally designed around. Some of the challenges, if you're using the software version, there is a new graphical application version you can download. I don't have a ton of experience with it, but it's kind of the same situation for me with UltraGrid. It tends to work best when you're running it straight from the command line. So there's, again, syntax and specific commands you need to learn to run it in the most stable configuration. Again, it's audio only, so most people will pair Jacktrip with some higher latency, lower quality video solution like Zoom or Skype. And there's no echo cancellation. So if you want to have a connection that's not totally disruptive in terms of feedback and echo, it requires some audio production know-how to prevent that from happening. And of course, since it's uncompressed, low latency, there's no onboard echo cancellation. You are the echo canceller as the user. Okay, so now that we've covered that completes the roundup of solutions, at least in my regular practice. Now we're going to look at those evaluation metrics we started with and the solutions side by side and some simple bar graphs. This is just further contextualization and meant to be a visual show of how these stack up against each other. Again, this is my opinion. I'm sure people have contrasting opinions, and that's great. We should talk about that. But from an ease of use standpoint, which again just means how easy is it for someone to operate this hardware software, get set up, get going. This is how it stacks up. So on the easier end, obviously this includes the WebRTC and software clients because they are designed for the broadest user base. Same thing, I included H323 as an easy to use solution because they're kind of purpose built, and once they're set up, it's as simple as placing a phone call. Lola is similar in that respect, but usually there's a little bit of legwork that needs to be done in the beginning to make sure the network is set up in the right way, as we talked about. And then the more esoteric solutions, the more complex, more kind of high quality, sophisticated solutions are the ones that have the more challenging setups. So Jacktrip, UltraGrid, and the hardwares. From a quality standpoint, though, you see is that the more complex systems offer the best quality. so that's where the trade-off. WebRTC and the soft clients do a decent job, and they are a viable solution for most things. But if your focus is quality, then you should be looking at MVTP, Nimbra, Lola, UltraGrid, Jacktrip. The only reason I don't put Lola at a 5 in this category is because of the video resolution restrictions, not only from what Lola can do from a video resolution standpoint, but also the bandwidth that comes with higher resolutions. Latency. So Lola, Nimbra, Jacktrip are the winners in this category. Lola, in my experience, is actually faster than the MVTP Nimbra solutions in the field, but it's very hard. They're neck and neck in terms of how low latency they are in practice. And Jacktrip is a super efficient audio only protocol, so it is very fast as well. Jacktrip can allow for synchronous performance without, the obvious video feedback that's very helpful that Lola provides. And then on the slower end, that H323 and the software clients are the slowest in this grouping. And finally, accessibility. So software clients, they're mostly free. They're cross-platform, easy to operate, easy to download, easy to get started. They win this category outright. The others have user groups, but they're more specific. Can be hard to find partners, especially when you're talking about hardware solutions. But Lola does have a healthy user base, and it's growing all the time. Again, UltraGrid, I think UltraGrid has more broad adoption in your region, so you might want to look into that a little bit more. In the US, UltraGrid has pretty limited reach. Here's a super confusing graph. I don't know why I still include this slide, actually. Each time I look at it, I don't know what it's supposed to communicate, but take from it what you will. I guess it's meant to be a visual representation of these different metrics. And, if you look at the right column key, if you can evaluate what the most important metric for you is, this is a clear indication of probably which place you should start. So if accessibility, if having a bunch of people get on board with your activity quickly is the primary purpose, then you probably want to go with a WebRTC or soft client because it's going to be the most accessible option among this roundup. If quality is your most important factor, then you're probably looking at UltraGrid, MVTP, Nimbra. So I think that's how it's supposed to be used. Remaining challenges. I should try to wrap this up so we have time for questions, shouldn't I? So this is the only slide I actually didn't modify since the last time we've done this workshop in 2019. That's not true. I actually added a bullet point, but the same principles are true. Like a lot of the best solutions are too expensive for most people. They're too complicated to set up and operate, or they require so much bandwidth that's unrestricted that it's not practical. No matter what solution you choose, it doesn't remove the necessity for production values and good quality video audio network that's going into these devices. So that's something that you unfortunately are going to have to spend some time teaching people and learning yourself in a lot of cases to get the best out of these things. The interesting observation that Lola brought to the fore is that it's actually networking technology that's too slow now. So if Lola can encapsulate video and audio in 1 to 3 milliseconds, but for me to send that signal to Claudio from Miami to Trieste, it's something like, I don't know, 200 milliseconds in best conditions, 198 milliseconds in best conditions, which is not viable for playing in sync with someone. And the network is where the majority of that slowdown comes from. Display technology is very bad. So TVs are they claim to be high refresh rate, but they buffer images in the way that they take them from devices. So there's this kind of, whenever you're setting up a Lola connection, there's this mysterious problem that always happens where the video seems slower than the audio, and that's usually because the TV or projector that you're using is creating an additional delay that's not even actually present in the connection itself. It's just the TV is very slow. And that's not mitigated by high frame rates, unfortunately. And finally, you know, we hear a lot every day about improvements in Wi-Fi and 5G, but the fact of the matter is that the integrity of those systems, those networks, and their latency metrics are not good enough for interactive real-time video communications. They work for talking, they work for phone calls, but not for, you know, playing with someone across a continent in high quality. The next few slides are just nice pictures of things that we've done as a community in the past. Infinite Bridge was a presentation at a recent NPAPW, the Royal College of Music. Near in the distance is a production of Aquanet. Again, this is Renata's group. They do the most complex and cool multimedia projects using this stuff. And a good example of non-classical music use of these types of tools. This is one of our projects with some of our partners, some of them which I believe are there, which was a multi-point exchange program we did a few years ago, Global Audition Training Project. These were using H.323 devices because of how common they were and the relatively good quality they could do. But it was a cool little project where we compared music tradition across multiple continents a few times a year. This was another APW performance at New World several years ago where we did a live dance battle using Lola with bands in Detroit and in Miami, and dance crews in Detroit and Miami, kind of doing a traditional urban dance battle, Cypher, which was fun. And now what's coming up? Everyone is really excited about immersion. That's kind of the topic of the day. I would argue that virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, they're having a challenge in the market just because no one's really come up with a compelling use case for them yet. And the technologies are still, even at this point in their infancy, and the quality is not very high in some cases. But, you know, we all have this idea at some point that we'll be able to walk into a virtual studio and it'll feel like we're sitting next to someone who's not physically there. And a lot of that has to do with these realms of virtual reality, augmented reality. So yeah, this is just some of the things that we think of when we think about what's coming. Probably even more so, or more realistic in the near term, are these things like immersive audio. These tools are actually already on the market and becoming more prevalent. The idea being that you can get a lot more quality information out of a three-dimensional audio signal than you can from traditional stereo or monophonic audio. And there's a lot of industry power behind this right now in terms of creating headphones that allow this kind of processing on the fly. So this one feels more real than a lot of the more kind of goggle-based VR experiences. That's an old picture. And then the last thing, so, you know, video and audio has obviously been our focus this morning, but haptic technology is next. So we can see if once we can see and hear each other in an immersive quality in an immersive scenario, the next thing is how can we touch each other over the network, or how can we feel what's going on? And so there are early experiments happening there as well. This is particularly important for my field because a lot of music education has to deal with physically adjusting people or feeling tension in parts of the body. And so this is a missing piece. And that's my talk, and I'm sticking to it. Look at that timing.
Thank you, Justin.
So you have a nice presentation coming up with Jesper, who's going to go into audio in more detail shortly, but I will happily try to answer any questions if they come up, and if they don't occur to you until later, you know, my email information is Anne or Claudio can share that with you.
Any question, comments, ideas?
It's early for you too.
Yeah. Yeah, there is one over there. Yeah. Wait for the mic.
Yeah,
Hey Justin,
Hi.
this is Sami from JAMK University of Applied Sciences in Jyväskylä, Finland. That was a mouthful, but in Finland, okay? Do you have any experience with the Swedish ELK Live technology or the hardware / software solution?
I am aware of it, but I have not actually used it myself. But I've heard good things. In how it's been described to me, the most comparable solution that I've talked about, I think, is Jack Trip, in terms of extreme low latency audio transmission. But yeah, I mean, it's relatively new on the market, and I know people who have used it. I have not myself used it.
Yep, we actually tried it on Friday. So we have first-hand experience, and Sweden is a funny place because we are happy users of LoLa all over the Europe, but Sweden is funny because they are using Nimbra and technologies like that, and
Yeah.
they came up with their own, you know, funny little yellow box. So we have been trying it out, and we will report it when we.
Yeah,
we
I'd
are
love to hear
finished with the
more.
testing. Yeah. So
Thank you.
thank you for the presentation. And I have driven by your construction site on Miami Beach, so I'm a homie.
We have to come back and come on the inside. Come to the inside.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, there, Richard.
Hi, Justin. It's Richard Bland from Royal College of Music.
Hi, Richard.
I'm just curious to know, in your experience, if there are many examples of people using hybrid. I can see there'd be issues going across, but you're talking a lot about Jack Trip being readily accessible, and what we've seen a lot over the pandemic is people wanting solutions that they can do on relatively low budgets, sometimes domestic connections, or they're not able to reach out to Lola. So we were looking to use Lola lots during lockdown, but actually only used it a handful of times. And people are quite often okay if they've got a video connection. We sometimes did things using audio movers for remote sessions, so we'd have someone producing. They'd just use a Teams connection. I was just wondering what your take on that is, whether people are using multiple systems.
Yes. Again, all these tools are just a means to an end, right? So it really, for me, comparing one to the next is actually quite simple because they all are based on the same audio standards. Even the software clients, the WebRTC clients, a lot of them leverage the exact same compression scheme that from one to the next. So if you're talking about high quality audio connections at low latency, Jack Trip's a great option. And it actually does work quite well over commodity commercial internet, which is a unique facet among some of these other tools. And with the advent of those hardware devices, which I think they're priced at $250, which is, it's not nothing, but That simplifies it a lot, because previously Jacktrip, as I mentioned, was a command line operated software, which maybe an audio engineer could handle, but your average performer or producer would not be comfortable using. But yeah, it's used to great effect, and especially in that area, there are some other cool experiments going on. A lot of the audio production infrastructure, as you know, is network based already now, in terms of those protocols in use. So there are experiments, and I think some of the folks from Edinburgh are there, but they've done some really cool experiments, kind of extending their audio network from their facility across Géant and Internet 2 to reach remote facilities. So like co-located recording studio, which is pretty cool.
So we're just looking to get into experiments with Dante over distance and things as well. So we've got the GPS clock. We're just a lot of work to do.
Yeah. But it's totally viable. And in fact, in Hollywood these days, a lot of the daily production work is done over these video communication tools. So they offer high enough quality that, people are able to produce, industry product at the highest level. So it's, whatever works. I think that's the gist of my talk is, you make the evaluation. I don't think anyone should tell you what the right tool is for the job.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we will have anyhow time, even if Justin is not here, for other people are here which can help in answering questions and so on. So now we are ready to jump into the audio part of it. And I guess we have the presentation from Jesper Andersen from the Royal College of Music in Copenhagen. And I don't want if you want to go to sleep or just follow Jesper as well. Maybe you deserve some sleep now.
I think I'm going to sign off, but I'll be back for more
Yeah,
later on today and tomorrow.
yeah, later on today because we have the panel where you are a member. Yeah.
Justin, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Of course. All right. Enjoy.